New Orleans, 1918. A city of jazz, celebration, and life. But beneath the music, something moved through the streets at night. Someone who left no trace, no face, no motive anyone could explain. Except one letter. One extraordinary letter that changed everything. New Orleans, in 1918, was one of the most culturally layered cities in all of America. It was a melting pot. French, Spanish, African, and Italian communities living side by side, separated by commerce, tradition, and sometimes deep suspicion. The city had just entered the 20th century, but it still carried the weight of older ways. Police resources were thin, record-keeping was inconsistent, and justice, as many historians have noted, often moved slowly in the humid Louisiana heat. The Italian immigrant community in particular had built a thriving network of small grocery stores and family businesses across the city. These families had come to America for stability, for safety. What they found instead was a series of late-night intrusions that would shake every one of them to the core. Between May 1918 and October 1919, a series of attacks on Italian-American grocers and their families gripped New Orleans. The attacker, who the press would eventually call the AxeMan, always entered through a chiseled back door panel, always struck at night, and always vanished without a single credible witness. Police were baffled, the public was terrified, and the newspapers, well, they sold a great many papers. The first widely reported attack occurred in May of 1918, targeting a grocer named Joseph Maggio and his wife. Neighbors discovered them the following morning. The back door panel of the home had been removed from the outside. Investigators noted something unusual at the scene. The attacker had left behind a tool, not by accident, but almost as if they wanted it found. In the months that followed, similar entries were discovered at multiple locations across the city. Each time, the method was identical. A rear door panel, chiseled cleanly away. Each time, the home belonged to an Italian immigrant grocer. What's important to understand is that none of the victims had any documented connection to each other beyond their profession and their heritage. The New Orleans Police Department, working with limited forensic tools by modern standards, struggled to establish motive. There were no fingerprints recovered, no physical descriptions of a suspect agreed upon, no witnesses who had seen anyone leaving the scenes. What investigators did have were patterns, and in criminology, patterns are everything. The press began speculating. Was this the work of a single individual? A criminal organization? Could it be linked to the secretive world of organized crime that had quietly taken root in Louisiana? That last question, as we will explore, turned out to be far more significant than most history books acknowledge. Here is where this story diverges from most true crime accounts, and where historians have found the most compelling, overlooked evidence. For decades, the AxeMan case was discussed primarily as the story of an unknown serial attacker. But several criminologists and historians examining the original case files have pointed to a pattern that suggests something more calculated. Every targeted family operated a small grocery. Every family was of Italian immigrant heritage, and every targeted location was in a specific geographic cluster within the city. In the early 20th century, New Orleans had a well-documented presence of organized criminal networks operating within the Italian immigrant community. Groups that, according to historical records, sometimes demanded payment from local business owners in exchange for protection. Historians, including Matthew Schmaltz, who researched the AxeMan extensively, found evidence suggesting that some victims had previously declined to pay into these protection arrangements. This is the detail most documentary accounts skip entirely. If the attacks were not random, if they were in fact targeted economic intimidation, then the psychology of this case shifts entirely. The AxeMan would not be a lone impulsive actor. He would be a calculated instrument of organized coercion. The police of 1918 New Orleans lacked both the investigative infrastructure and, some historians suggest, the institutional will to pursue organized crime connections aggressively, which meant that a significant investigative lead may have been left almost entirely unexplored at the time. In March of 1919, something happened that no one in New Orleans or in American crime history had ever seen before. A letter appeared in local newspapers. It was written in an elevated, almost theatrical style, and it was signed the AxeMan. In the letter, the writer declared that he would visit the city once more on a specific night, the following Tuesday at midnight. He declared that any home or establishment from which jazz music could be heard would be spared. Every home where silence reigned would not. The city responded. On the night of Tuesday, March 19, 1919, New Orleans erupted in jazz. Dance halls filled to capacity. Home parlors rang with piano music. Local composers even wrote a piece titled "The AxeMan's Jazz" in direct response. And that night, no incidents were reported anywhere in the city. Investigators and psychologists studying this case have described the letter as a remarkable act of psychological theater. The writer demonstrated an understanding of crowd psychology, media manipulation, and social coercion that was extraordinarily sophisticated for the era. Was the letter genuine? Was it a bluff designed to cement a terrifying public myth? Or was it, as some historians have proposed, a deliberate message designed to demonstrate that the attacker held power over the entire city? That they could dictate the behavior of hundreds of thousands of people with a single piece of writing? The jazz letter remains one of the most psychologically complex documents in American true crime history. And it was almost certainly designed that way. The central question of any true crime investigation is never just what happened. It is always why. Modern forensic psychologists studying historical cases like the AxeMan have identified several possible psychological profiles that fit the documented evidence. If the attacks were connected to organized protection rackets, then the psychological profile is one of instrumental aggression, violence or intimidation used as a functional tool rather than a personal impulse. The attacker, under this theory, would be methodical, disciplined, and capable of operating without emotional escalation. The consistent method of entry, the chiseled door panel, supports this. It suggests preparation, patience, and a calm operational mindset, not the signature of impulsive behavior. The jazz letter, however, adds a second layer entirely. It suggests someone with a need for recognition, not merely for results, but for the experience of public power. Psychologists call this a need for dominance expression. The attacker did not simply want outcomes. They wanted the city to know it was theirs to control. This combination, cold instrumentality combined with a need for theatrical dominance, represents a rare and specifically dangerous psychological profile. The case was never officially solved. No one was ever convicted. In late 1919, the attacks ceased. The reasons why they stopped are as debated as the reasons they began. Some historians believe the perpetrator left the city. Others have proposed that internal changes within organized crime networks made the campaign unnecessary. A few researchers have even speculated that a suspect, known to investigators at the time, the AxeMan of New Orleans, was never caught. But the case left marks on American society that can still be felt today, in ways most people never consider. First, the investigation directly exposed the inadequacy of early 20th century forensic methods. The lack of standardized evidence collection, the absence of centralized criminal records, and the reliance on eyewitness testimony alone. All of these limitations were brought into sharp public relief by this case. Historians of American law enforcement note that the post-World War I period saw increased pressure for the professionalization of police departments across the United States, a push that cases like the AxeMan helped accelerate. Second, the Jazz Letter introduced to the American public something entirely new: the concept of a criminal communicating directly with society through mass media. This was, in many respects, the first documented case of a suspect using the press as a psychological weapon against an entire population. That psychological template, the dramatic public letter, would appear again in American crime history, most famously decades later in other high-profile unsolved cases. The AxeMan established the archetype. Third, and perhaps most importantly, this case forced a public reckoning with the vulnerability of immigrant communities in early American cities. The targeting of Italian-American grocers highlighted how these communities existed in spaces where institutional protection was inconsistent at best. The AxeMan of New Orleans remains officially unsolved. The case files sit in archives. The questions remain open. But what history records with certainty is this: for 17 months, one figure, identity unknown, motive disputed, made an entire city change its behavior. That is a form of power that no amount of time has managed to fully explain. This has been an investigative documentary